Hey guys, Will here. So we're going to be diving back into entry-level sim racing mods today. We'll look at some exciting products for the Logitech G series sim racing wheel. So we've got a couple of steering wheels as well as a magnetic mod and some magnetic paddles from a company called Alen Sim Products. We're going to be answering three main questions in today's video. How difficult are these products to install? What do they like to drive with? And do we recommend them for the money? So let's dive in. Okay, so before we get into pricing, firstly, big thank you to Alen Sim Products for sending across this gear for us to check out today. Now, if you do find today's video helpful and you want to help support our work here at Boosted Media, there will be some affiliate links down in the description below. Those are an awesome way of helping support our work here at Boosted Media at no additional cost to you guys. We really do appreciate your support there if today's video helps you out. But let's start off now by talking about pricing. So there are a couple of different options available. You can see there's two different wheels that we have here in front of us. Those are essentially the same thing, just different models to suit different wheels within the Logitech range. So if you've got a G29 or a G923 like what we have here, then you'll be looking at this guy. If you've got a G920, then you can see the layout is just slightly different with relation to the dials and buttons down the bottom of the wheel. So that is just to account for the differences there. So taking the pricing directly from their website, the basic wheel comes in at £74.99. That comes with a grip tape option, similar to what you would find on a tennis racket or a hockey stick or something like that. Unfortunately, we don't have that here to show you. What we have here is the rubber grip version. Now, the rubber grip version adds an extra £10 to the price. Then we also have the option of this magnetic paddle mod, which literally just bolts to the back of the wheel, as you'll see a little bit later on. That can function with the factory shifters if you want it to. That adds an extra £5. And then if you do want to opt for the carbon fiber shifter paddles to replace the factory metal ones, those are an extra £35. So the total price, as you see configured here in front of us, comes in at £109. And then there is also the option for some custom liveries, which I actually have done a really good job of from what I can see. Again, we don't actually have them physically here in the studio to check out. Those other liveries are going to cost you an extra £10. So just so you guys know as well, there are versions of these wheels that are compatible with the Thrustmaster T300 if you happen to have that wheel. And there is also a hub adapter which they have, which is able to convert the Logitech G series wheel to a standard 50 or 70mm stud pattern if you want to mount your own aftermarket wheel. So just keep that in mind as well. But all of that stuff is available on their website if you want to check it out in more detail. So in addition to the wheel and any accessories that you've added to your order, inside the box, you're going to find a little 3D printed shim, which you'll see the purpose for later on when we get to installing the wheel, as well as a little bag of replacement screws and 3D printed button caps, which are going to replace the standard L and R buttons on the steering wheel. Those aren't going to fit with this particular wheel, and you'll understand the reason for that a little bit later on as well. Now, in terms of the wheel itself, just a couple of things you need to be aware of before we get onto the installation. Firstly, it is constructed of genuine carbon fiber, 3mm thick there. Would have liked to have seen it maybe a little bit thicker. You can see there is quite a significant amount of twist there in the rim itself, significantly more than what you actually find in the standard wheel, which is the reason I call that out. Now, obviously, we do have to kind of put this in the context of the price that they're asking for it. We're not expecting to have something that's going to be as rigid as some of the multi-$1,000 wheels that we've tested here at Boosted Media. But it wouldn't be right if we didn't point out that it does have more twist in it than the standard wheel does, but we'll elaborate on that further when we go for a drive a little bit later on. Now, the rubber grips themselves are quite firm, a little bit less squishy than some of the other ones that we've tested in the past. But again, considering the price, I think the build quality is absolutely fine. They've got a good amount of grip to them, and they're not too sticky, so they're not going to pick up too much dirt and debris, even if you are driving with bare hands. Now, the wheel comes in at a diameter of 280mm, which is identical to the diameter of the factory wheel. However, it is under half the weight of the standard wheel. So this guy comes in at just a touch over 220 grams with the rubber grips. The standard wheel is a little touch over 500 grams by my measurement. But otherwise, it's a very simple and basic product. Presentation is good. You can see the carbon fiber's got that nice glossy finish, very similar to what we would find on a Fanatic Formula style wheel, for example. You can see here a little bit of a seam on the rubber grips where the two halves are kind of molded together over the carbon fiber, but nothing excessive there. It's certainly not sharp or rough or anything that's going to damage your hands or anything like that. But yeah, look, overall, I think the quality and the finishes is what I would expect to see for the price. So let's jump ahead now and get into the installation. It's going to be really interesting to see whether this is something that you can just kind of quickly switch between cars, or whether it's more of a, once you've done it, you're probably not going to want to change it back to the standard wheel. Obviously, a GT3 style wheel like this isn't going to really be suitable for things like drifting or, you know, rally driving, things like that. Whereas the standard rim that you get with these wheels is a lot more versatile. So let's dive in now and check out the installation process. Now, the initial installation process does actually require you to completely disassemble the entire wheel shell, remove the printed circuit board or PCB from the button plate as well, which then risks all of the buttons falling out, which did happen to me. Not a problem, put them back in again. But look, the instructions were a little vague in a few areas. Nothing really stood out as being particularly, wrong or anything like that, but there are a few steps that I kind of had to backtrack. Basically, what you're having to do is you're having to get in behind the wheel, because if you have a look at the factory wheel here in my hand, it's actually got two little screws there, and these screws hard mount the wheel to the button plate and the PCB from the back side. So you need to actually get to these screws, remove them to be able to remove the wheel from the front. Otherwise, it would actually be a lot easier. So what you might be thinking then is, once you've removed those screws, could you just not put them in place again? And that would make the wheel nice and easy to change over. And look, to a point, that is true, but there is a couple of other things that I think are important to point out here. So when you mount the wheel from the front, you're screwing in with these kind of self-tapping style screws into the plastic threads which are on the hub assembly. So what's going to happen over time, if you're removing the wheel and changing it regularly, those plastic threads are going to weaken. It's inevitable, it will happen over time. And eventually what's going to happen is you're going to strip those threads out entirely. And again, this isn't Alien's fault, but the way that this wheelbase is constructed, the way the hub's put together, is such that, it's just not designed to be changing wheels regularly. So yeah, without dragging this on too much, if you're looking for something that's going to allow you to quickly switch between a GT3 or Formula style wheel like this one and back to your round or D-shaped wheel for rally or drifting or anything like that, then this probably isn't going to be suitable for you. Additionally as well, you will need to unscrew the 4 L and R buttons, and those are also plastic threads on the back as well. So those will also strip out over time. But look, otherwise the installation of the wheel itself wasn't too difficult. I mean, I've been doing this kind of stuff all of my life, so I'm pretty used to this kind of thing. But if you're the sort of person that enjoys pulling things apart and putting them back together again, then I think you'll actually enjoy the process here. There was nothing here that was really scary or anything that really felt like I was at risk of breaking something, which I think is the most important thing. So let's talk a little bit more about the magnetic mod 2. Now, this is very simple to just bolt on, basically just clipping around the outside, and because the factory shifters are actually made of steel, it actually works perfectly fine with those. So if you're just looking at the magnetic mod, it does actually do a really nice job. It gives you a nice positive click feel, and it does transform the experience of shifting with the paddle shifters. So I definitely would recommend, for the price and given that it's so easy to install, this is a good option. The one that we reviewed years ago was very good as well. But yeah, it definitely does make a positive difference and very easy to install as well. If you then want to install the magnetic shifter paddle mod, you are going to need to disassemble the wheel pretty much to the entire extent that we did for the wheel, and then even further, you would actually remove the hub from the base, remove the stock shifter paddles. There's just 4 screws that are holding those in place. They then slide out, you slide the new ones in, and then you fix them in place with the little square nuts and the bolts that are provided. So again, not difficult, but a little bit of added complexity there as well. I would say that even if you're not interested in the rim itself, the magnetic paddle module and the magnetic ring mod around the back is actually a worthwhile upgrade in and of its own, and it's actually very cheap as well. So you may want to consider upgrading to the GT3 rim at the same time, seeing as you're going to be pulling it apart anyway. But I think if you're wanting to stay with the round rim, but you are interested in improving that shifter feel, then this does make a really positive difference. You can see here, really snappy response. I can still kind of pull the magnets away and then gradually squeeze it in. So it's not a really, really solid snap like some of the really expensive wheels that we tested. But look, this feels, I'd say, on par with a Fanatic magnetic paddle shifter wheel. So, for the money, I think that it is very good value, provided again, of course, that you don't mind pulling your wheel apart to actually install the mod. But there's not an excessive amount of flex in the 3mm thick paddles. And yeah, overall for the price, I think it's a really good mod. So let's talk about the rim now. So look, I've got to admit that I am a little bit disappointed with the amount of flex that is present in this wheel. I alluded to it earlier on in the review before we actually had it mounted, and I was just twisting it in my hands. But having it actually on the base here, I mean, look, we've got it mounted to a table here. There is a little bit of flex in the table. There's a little bit of flex inherent in the way the wheelbase mounts to the table as well. And look, the flex in the rim does kind of just get lost in the amount of movement that's going on in general. Remember, of course, that I am used to driving with a very expensive sim rig that has everything absolutely solid. So, it's very hard to impress me in that sense. But I think it does kind of get absorbed into the general flex of the wheelbase and the table itself, but it is something that I do notice when I'm driving. And there have been a lot of other wheels that I've tested over the years that do have some flex inherent in the design, and I don't notice it when I'm driving. But with this one, I do find that I'm sitting there and I'm sort of twisting it in my hands. And you guys can see for yourself there. I mean, that's how much it's flexing. Now, I did a little bit of research here, just trying to understand why they've gone with a 3mm thick carbon as opposed to 5mm thick, which would give us a lot more rigidity. I found that to buy a sheet of 5mm carbon fiber as opposed to 3mm carbon fiber is about a 10% price increase. So in trying to keep this as cheap as possible, I guess it makes sense that they've gone with 3mm carbon instead of 5. I wouldn't want them to upgrade to 5mm thick carbon and then increase the price, but what I think might be a good idea is to have a second option available, maybe if you do want to have that slightly more rigid feel, but you know, obviously the slight increase in price going along with that as well. But yeah, look, that flex does bother me. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. But look, overall, the driving experience is very good. I did quite a bit of driving in F122 and Assetto Corsa Competizione, and I found that the rim was very comfortable to use. Obviously, the button placement is stipulated by, again, the Logitech design. It is relatively easy to roll your hands around and reach the buttons. If they were to put additional buttons up here, then you would have to wire them in, or you'd have to have levers reaching around. It'd get infinitely more complex and more expensive. So I think for what it is, it does a really good job. Ergonomically, it feels really nice in the hands as well. Those rubber grips do have a really nice feel to them. One of the things that I always check for in wheels is when I roll them around, my thumb isn't rubbing up against any sharp carbon in the corners. So you can imagine with my hand is like that. And yeah, not really a problem with this wheel. The thumb holes are quite narrow. So if you have really chunky hands, it may be an issue for you. I've got quite slim girly hands, so it's not a problem for me. But overall, I found the wheel very comfortable to use. And I think for the price, it does do a good job. But again, it is just that flex in the carbon fiber that does bother me. So is it a worthwhile upgrade to your sim rig? Now, I guess given the fact that it's not something that's easily interchangeable, it's really just going to come down to the types of driving that you're doing primarily. I think if you're like I used to be when I was driving with a G27 years ago, I played the F1 games from Codemasters pretty much exclusively for about 10 years, I want to say. So something like this would have been absolutely ideal for me. I think if you're only playing maybe Formula style games, or you're only playing GT3 games, maybe you only play Assetto Corsa Competizione, and you're not really too worried about needing to use a round wheel, then something like this, it makes a lot of sense for the price, I think. And you probably are going to enjoy the experience and have that little bit more, I guess, realism in your sim racing experience overall using a rim like this. But definitely if you're somebody that's wanting to interchange between driving styles regularly and looking for something that you're going to be able to swap between all the time, then I wouldn't recommend going with something like this. It's just too complex and too much risk of damaging something or having those threads strip out over time. I think in those kinds of scenarios, if a lot of the direct drive wheelbases that do have interchangeable quick releases are too expensive for you, so something like a Moza R5, for example, then maybe have a look at the Thrustmaster ecosystem. They've got some cheaper wheels that do have those interchangeable rims, which, while the quick release isn't absolutely amazing on those bases, it does mean that you can change rims relatively quickly without any hassle like what we have with this rim. So really that's what it comes down to, guys. I think it does a good job at what it's aiming to do. I would like it if it was a little bit more interchangeable, but again, that's not their fault. That's just a limitation of Logitech's design. But I really hope that today's video has helped you out. If it has, please do leave a thumbs up. If you are looking at picking one up, remember though, we do have those links down below as well if you want to help support the channel. So we really do appreciate that, but obviously there's no obligation to do so. But above all, thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye.